what actually matters for kids as they grow.
I mean, it's unconditional love. Either they're hopefully getting it from home, from if there's an educator in their school, if it's a coach, if it's a homeschool co-op mom who's showing them unconditional love. Sometimes it's from your grandparents, maybe your aunt raised you. Where are you getting that unconditional love? Because your inner voice becomes your adult voice. And we know that the person who spends the most time correcting, you hear that growing up and you say, oh, I made a mistake again. I'm wrong again. And I think, especially with neurodivergent children, they hear all the things they do wrong so much. So we just have to show up with unconditional love. There's boundaries around that, but they know that they're loved unconditionally. And that is going to steer the ship always in the right direction.
Welcome to Hyperfocus and High Performance with Christine Howe, where we explore how you can work with your brain, build your dreams, and live on purpose with more clarity, creativity, and presence. Today, I'm so grateful to welcome Nicole Santiago of Family ADDventures to the Think Time podcast. Nicole is here because she is a heartfelt colleague in this work with me. She is as passionate about the ADHD families and those who have neurodiversity impacting their daily lives as anyone I know. And when I think of Nicole, one phrase comes to mind, and that is by John Ruskin. He said, when love and skill work together, expect a masterpiece. And so Nicole has had her hands in so many different aspects of this work, from training police officers to working on the front lines with the kids in the schools, to coaching children on how to set up their study environments, and then building even the relational capacities between the moms and the kids, and the parents and the kids, not just moms, between the parents and the kids. So I'm crying already. I'm so happy to have you here. And I mean that because it matters, and it matters intergenerationally. And if I recall correctly, was it you that asked the question, I want you to think about being a good grandparent?
That was my
you.
question.
So that to me is the right place to start. When we are becoming the people we're becoming, we've received things from generations before us, but we also pass forward 3 to 4 generations. And I haven't heard anyone else out there in all the coaching spaces ask that question. So I'll let that be our jump off point, and you can take it where you want to go.
Yes. Thank you, Christine. Thank you for inviting me today. And I'm also thankful for our friendship too. So thank you for that. So the grandparent question actually comes from the past, because when we think about starting this work of really supporting a family where they're at, be that with the school system, be that with the diagnosis, be that with, trouble on the home front and it's not calm and peaceful, where do we start? And what makes that the most difficult? It's when we look back and see, how were we helped and supported?
Yeah.
How were our parents helped and supported by their grandparents? I think when you start thinking about those questions, you understand why I say, what kind of grandparent do you want to be? Because hopefully we've evolved, but we know 2 generations ago, ADHD wasn't a thing. I mean, and so
it was, but
it wasn't a thing. It wasn't out there. I couldn't name my company Family ADD, Family ADDventures, and people would understand. Right. Maybe even 1 generation ago, that would have been difficult. So I think really starting to realize that we have these beautiful differences, and however you choose to label them, these neurotypes, these soul capacities that are very different. However we decide to label that or name that or support that, it matters that we honor the space. And that's what Family ADDventures is all about, honoring people and especially children in the family relationship and dynamic. How do we support that to be the best it can be, so that parents are understanding themselves, children are understanding themselves, and we're understanding each other to bring calm. I think, the high tide raises all boats. And that's something I use in all of my work, especially when working with school teams. I'm going to love on those school teams just as much as I'm going to love on the families, because that's how we're going to get results. There's some very particular legal processes involved in special education. So I have training on that to help, move outcomes forward for children if they're in the public school system. even if they're in private schools. I mean, it's always about that relationship. So strengthening relationships is really the core of what Family ADDventures is about.
So your coaching helps people not only see the meaning behind what they're doing and how they're supporting their kids, but also helps to bridge the practical gaps in the school. And even considering my goodness, when you get into the legal intricacies, that's a lot of work to understand all the legal pieces that go into supporting that child through that transition and then helping them thrive. And again, today we have so many different ways of doing that. We've got public school, we've got private school, we've got homeschool, and now we have all these homeschool co-ops and hybrids that you can it goes on to infinity, all the way to world schooling, all the different ways you can bring this novelty to help an ADHD brain to grab growth. And then, oh goodness, there's so many different ways this conversation can go. Let's bring it to that parent. So right now in this conversation, we're talking to the parents, and they have all those pieces in mind. The legal pieces, they have the school pieces, they have do I need to quit my job and homeschool my kid? Well, how do I pay for this? Where are the resources? Like, there's so many questions, and navigating all of those different pieces. I remember you and I talked years ago about you're the one who helps them tie that all together with a string. And so we're going to take that right there and put it to the side, take all of this, put it over here for 1 second. And I want to focus just on the parent, because what we talked about was this parent becoming the grandparent. And we're going to get over to the children in a second. There's actually a lot of research behind a parent will spend money on their kids all day long. Okay. But spending money on themselves, they're not going to do. And yet the research shows that if they build into themselves, the children are going to become who that parent is. And so the most efficient and most effective thing they can do is actually invest in themselves. And then the mirror neurons are going to do their job, and that child is going to learn from that parent. So what do you want that parent to understand about themselves? Not just all the things that they're doing for their kids. I'd love to introduce you to something I created specifically for brains like yours. Think Time membership is a guided neuroplanning membership designed to help you align with your design, work with your brain, and build your dreams with more clarity, confidence, creativity, and presence. Instead of forcing yourself into systems that don't fit you, you'll learn how to plan in the native, creative language of your brain using my neuroplanning framework. Love your design. Then dream, decide, do, review. Inside the membership, you'll join a community of growth-oriented leaders for weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual guided planning experiences, so you'll never have to figure it out all alone. Your membership also includes access to the Think Time Neuroplanner, a whole brain visual planning system designed to help you harness the strengths of your mind instead of constantly fighting against it. And when you join, you'll receive access to the neuroplanning course and tutorials, planning tools and templates, live group coaching, monthly Q&A, and a live onboarding session so you can begin to use the system right away. If you're ready to increase your opportunity to experience more clarity, calm, confidence, creativity, meaningful productivity, and presence while getting more of the right things done in less time, with peace, not pressure, visit think-time.com/podcast. I'd love to help you build a life that works with your brain, aligns with your design, and reflects what matters most.
I love that you said this, because I think many parents are surprised when they purchase a package with me because they didn't sign up sometimes for the work, because I'm going to ask questions that get to the crux of the relationship, that get to the crux of who you are. If you haven't figured out how you show up in society with your difference, because let's face it, most parents, you're probably either you or your spouse is neurodivergent. That's how it passes on. There's a reason that these differences are here. So if you haven't kind of faced what that looks like for you, and you've bottled it up and become a very productive person, and you're doing all the right things, but you've bottled up a lot of things, your child is going to show you what you've stifled. And so that's their job,
So if you want just surface level answers to fix your child, Nicole is not the coach for you.
Right. I will give you all that support. I will give you the support, but those aren't the people that usually resonate with the work the same way. So, I have those superficial level, hey, I just want you to show up at the meeting, right? We're just going to an IEP meeting or something. But that isn't the same, and the results won't last as long. It's not, because you're not developing. I mean, this is a process, it's a process to figure out. I mean, I remember my first ebook was about homeschool, and I had like a whole article on pros and cons of homeschooling because I had to sit with it, right? I had to say, can I homeschool and what does that look like at the time, my husband and I were managing jobs and all the things, and that was a process. So there's so many pieces to an educational consultant is what I say, because education can be so many things. But us as a parent, I've had to do a lot of that work of the way my kids show up are the way that I will reflect, like you said, the way I show up for myself. So if you don't start showing up for yourself, and if you have to get it hidden because you said, hey, I bought a special education advocacy package, and all of a sudden my advocate is asking questions about what happens after school when I'm tired and my child drops their stuff everywhere. That's the questions we're asking, because we're not going to solve it in one meeting, and we're not going to solve it in one space. You have to do the work yourself so that can trickle down to your children. And they need the structure and the limits so much. I think there's been a swing with parenting where it's more like almost laissez-faire, like show up as you are, just be the way you are. We still need the structure and limits, like really actually even more for neurodivergent kids. They are so uncomfortable without the structure. They flail, they're drowning without structure. And there's been a shift in parenting to more like, let them be who they are, let them show up how they want to be. And we want to honor that. But a toddler, especially, like developmentally, we know the brain needs structure and needs to know who steers the ship. If they think they're steering the ship at all, that's anxiety. The reason why 3, 4, and 5-year-olds might show up with anxiety, if they're a neurodivergent neurotype and they've been told that they have to lead this family, that is stressful. It's going to show up as behavior.
That's not talked about a lot enough. I think that we think we're being kind to our children. Here are all your choices. What do you want to do? Why don't you decide the day? And that creates anxiety. Mom, you don't know what we're doing today? Oh my gosh, I'm too. I don't, and I don't think that is the marketing. We think, it's marketed as you're being so sweet, but there is this balance. And I love that you just said that. Like we want them to become who they are, and we want them to notice the insides of themselves. That's that mindfulness piece. And I don't think you're saying don't have them become aware of their mind and their body and how they're feeling. That's not what you're saying. You're saying yes, and also it's both this structure and this mindful awareness of who am I becoming, who am I in the midst of this world, who am I in the midst of this family, who am I as a student, and then what are the structures, what are the boundaries. I remember even like 30 years ago there was this study of kids in a playground, and they thought, okay, we don't want the kids to feel stifled with this fence. So the kids, prior to the fence being taken off, they were playing to the edge of the fence. They were having so much fun in all the parts of this playground. The progressive thinkers of the day took away the fence, and the kids huddled to the center of the playground, and nobody went to the edges because they didn't feel safe to take up the entire space. They didn't have that structure of, you can come to this edge, and this is where the playground stops. This is where the play happens. And it did create that inner anxiety. And so what I heard you say as well, switching back to what you said, was when a parent comes home at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is bordering burnout here. So how does parental burnout quietly affect children, even when parents are technically doing everything right? If they're personally living with burnout, what do you see impacting the kids based on your experience?
I think one of the things that happens is because there's so many choices for parents nowadays, because there's so many different parenting movements, different educational options, a lot of it is decision fatigue. And so you have to make decisions for children all the time, unless your structures are, hopefully your structures are in place so you don't. So when you have the good structures, you remove that decision fatigue from the family. But also as a burnout adult, you're navigating, do I need to sign up for a charter school before it's time? Do we need to transfer schools? Is it not working? I mean, I get the parent calls of all of those things, like my work needs me to show up from here to here. Now I have to decide about after school care programs. I mean, there's just so many choices. And because the family unit has become really more of a nuclear one instead of that extended family that it was for, generations. Also, you don't have anyone to unload your parenting capacity. You don't have anyone to share parenting with. And so you are burnt out. And that's just the parenting piece, let alone, what jobs are expecting of us and what's happening and shifting in general. But that, I think, is when the burnout happens, when you're expected to show up as your best self at your job. You're expected to show up as your best self for your children and know all of the nuances of how they're going to be educated, how to parent them, what food should they eat, because we know there's toxins in foods. And I think that's all overwhelming. I also think as neurodivergent neurotypes, like, people, we want to know all the things too, so we can hyper focus on, oh, I found out that this is really bad. There's a toxin in this particular food, so we're going to switch to all of this. So you're making a choice about the nutrition. Now we're going to make a change. And because of our brain type as parents, we're going to look into all the things, but that's overwhelming. So when you come home at the end of the day and you feel like you've made the right choice for school, you packed the right lunch, you showed up at your work job the way you're supposed to show up. If that's online too, the boundaries gotten more difficult when you're working from home too. The remote work is hard because now you're like, now my kids are here on a day off and I'm supposed to be doing work, all of those things. When all of that is happening for you and then somebody drops their stuff for the sixth time in the hallway because there just isn't a structure and there wasn't like a built-in system there, and that actually stresses you out, it's something you've chosen. Because there's parents that are like, I don't care what the front door looks like, I care about their room, right? You have to know what matters to you. But if that is a constant issue and you're constantly looking at the front door with all the shoes and it's stressing you out, you're going to break when it happens again.
I've been saying lately, it's not that you made a mountain out of a molehill. It's that your molehill was on top of a mountain. It's like,
exactly
right there.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not failing. They're overloaded and they need support.
Exactly. Yeah, you said all of the stuff I said in one sentence. Thank you.
So for all the parents who are right here, you're snapping at something small. You're not a bad parent. You're not failing. You're overloaded and you need support. And that's okay. It's normal. And every parent of a neurodivergent kid, and especially if you are also a neurodivergent parent, that's normal. I have worked so many different jobs. I have been in so many different atmospheres and environments in my life. There is nothing more difficult than parenting. Like, period. And I don't care if you have the most wonderful kids ever. There's nothing more difficult than parenting. Okay, so now let's pivot from looking at the parent as a person to the relationship dynamic between that parent and the child. So burnout solved by support. We're going to say that's solved. Now let's talk about the connection. And let's talk about how connection matters between the parents and the children, even when the outcomes are uncertain. So all the therapies, all the support, sometimes they work. You've done all the supplements, you've done all the structures, you've done all your pieces. Sometimes there are going to be traits that are going to last until they're 80. Okay. Do you know an 80-year-old? I mean, this was one of the most clarifying thoughts for me. I had to see an 80-year-old that was like me to realize that's not going away. Like, this is who I am. This is part of my personality. And I'm going to still be that way when I'm 80. So then what? So in view of the relationship between the parents and the children, or the parent and the child, for me, it's like, 1 on 5 neurodivergent. Maybe 6. It's like we literally have 6 different personalities, each one needing a different level of support. And, for me as a mom to meet all those different needs and maintain those connections and supporting them in their unique ways. So that's why I'm like, children, child, I'd love to talk about it just being one child, but let's be real. It's, mayhem, and a beautiful mayhem. And I love the mayhem. From your long-term perspective, you have been doing this how many years?
I've been doing this work since really 2019.
2019. So this is a full 7-year view. You've been doing this work. And prior to you formally doing the work, I'm just going to assume you were doing it before you were doing the work. So let's say that you started getting your experience when you were finding solutions for your family.
So that would be 2012 when my son was diagnosed, was when I first really, it opened the Pandora's box of, oh, this is a thing.
Okay, so 2012, and that's 14 years. And then when you were doing your search prior to 2012, let's bring it back further. When was that?
That would be 2009 when I started seeing signs in my son that it wasn't like I couldn't just do all my teacher tricks, like nothing was working. I know that's what's so wild. I had training in child's development, all of the things. And I was like, wait, he's not responding to all these typical things that I use. Some scary things happened. I mean, he almost drowned in the ocean in Puerto Rico at 2 years old because he ran away because he was excited by something. And I wasn't expecting that. Those children, some of them hold your hands and some of them run, but he just, the whole listening, dropped my entire purse in the ocean. I will never forget. And we grabbed him out. But my purse, phone, all that stuff was ruined. I didn't care because I saved my child, but I think we don't realize how different when your child's different. I mean, he still laughs at the monkey. He calls it a leash, the monkey backpack. After that moment, he had a little monkey backpack that he wore. It was a very soft thing with a little attachment for my arm because I realized I wasn't going to go through that again. I didn't want him to get hurt. And I think those are the things that if you're a parent and you don't know that this is a possibility, it's scary. And so a lot of what I do is the Sherpa role. It's like, I've been here. How can I help you to the next level? This is something that I wasn't expecting to talk about, but I love it because it does capture what that felt inside moment. Like your child, you were an expert in child development, and your 2-year-old, he breaks the mold. You knew what to do, and he just ran out. My background is in a lot of homeschooling, and so this brings me to one memory in particular where I had one child who, in her development, she went through some trauma in her early life. So there's trauma and ADHD. It's a beautiful, a mix of a lot of different neurodivergent. But her vision was not physically impaired, but because of what she had experienced, her vision went like this. And so she couldn't see peripheral here or here. And so she would run into doorways on one side of her body or the other side. She just kept running into doorways. And I was like, what's going on? Well, when I'm out with my group and there are 45 children around and they're climbing on these big rocks, I know my child can't see that there's a 20-foot drop right to the right. And there was one moment specifically where they got ahead of me and they ran up. And I am so glad I didn't process the full meaning of that moment until after it happened, because they were up high, and had they fallen, there was like a river that would have whooshed them away into a swirl. And I was like, oh my gosh, for a lot of kids, they could just run up there, look at the view, come back. My kids, I didn't know impulsively what they would do at any point in time. And so I looked like an incredibly anxious mom. I had issues, right? No, I was very attuned to my children and their unique needs. And so I made rules around it. Like, I need to be able to see you on the hikes. So then there, all the moms are thinking I'm overprotective and, a little controlling. And I'm like, no, I know we are just hiking on a little path, but my kids are going to run off the path and they're going to be on the cliff and looking over the cliff and then falling over. I don't know that they're going to stop before the end of the cliff. And so that's an interesting thing to carry. And that actually helps me to get some insight on some of those social dynamics that played out based on raising my neurodivergent kids, because they didn't have to carry that. They didn't have to carry that weight of the anxiety that I believe is an inborn gift to the child, that parent carries that extra anxiety, that child, I know that child has the capacity to climb up and maybe fall over that railing. You know what I mean? And so that's the beauty of that mother-child relationship and the uniqueness in keeping them safe, because they know intuitively that child's capable of that behavior. But then they surprise us, right? Because we have to learn. My second born, I was like, I don't know what she's going to do ever. I just could never predict, a lot like your child. I just didn't know. Anyways, that you just brought me back. So that was a little tangent. Bring me back to my. But you said something really expansive, because meeting children where they're at, to be the kind of parent that we want to show up for, we know we have to show up differently for each child. I mean, we do. Some of them need, and that's also what a good educator does. right? Like that's 30 children in a room and you know what's going to reach this one to understand the lesson versus that one. When you go on a field trip, that one needs to be partnered with this child. Otherwise, they're going to both do something wild. You know what? All of those things, but all of those things are learning about humans and raising humans and how to respond to each other. So we know what boundaries they need, when can it be taken away. And that's all something you learn as they grow. And I think, you know, that shows how much wisdom you have and that's another thing that I really think is important is to tap into the wisdom of the parent. One thing that schools miss a lot is that they're professional educators, but the wisdom of the parent, and the law actually leans into this. The parent is the most important member of that committee. But remember, you have so much wisdom about your child. And so intuitively, when you know either school's off or there's a daycare center that's not working or, you know, something's not working with this, you go to a friend's house, they come home sad, what happened at that friend's house? I mean, that's all the parent intuition that is so valid. I mean, that's the first question I ask when you call me. You know, why did you call? You have some kind of intuition. It's not usually the end of the world. They're calling because they're like, something's off. My child's not okay. That wisdom, which you just talked about, because you knew your child might, you know, it's the same thing. It stays with us. We need that. And I need to know what your intuition is. That's why you called me. So let's figure it out. And that's so important.
I think what you said is really, really critical too. I'm going to toss it back to you, like with the intuition piece. I think so many parents are used to being invalidated when they say, I have a concern, and people try to comfort you by saying, that's not a concern. And it doesn't go away. Because someone says that doesn't happen, you know, it's like it's popping up. One of the things I've really been leaning into is that even if we invalidate our feelings, that doesn't make them go away and it doesn't make them not exist. And speaking from, you know, I'm a counselor by training. From a mental health perspective, I'm actually an educator and a counselor by training, which comes out in my work as well. What's the statement? It is the closer that you get to reality, the better your mental health is. And so the acceptance of reality is mental health. And so if you have an intuition or a feeling and you push it down, you're further from reality because that feeling is real. And so leaning into those intuitions and dealing with it. Now, can we all have something connected to another instance? Sure, you know, if I interpret you as a certain way and that has more to do with another relationship, that can certainly happen, but you don't discover that by saying that intuition feeling isn't there. It's you lean into it, explore it, where that come from. And I'm either going to I'm going to verify that came from my relationship with Nicole, or, oh no, that came from my relationship with my great aunt. That one time she said, you know, whatever it was. So I think that the people who are listening within my community are going to value being heard. And so I think when they come to you, those who are, you know, peaking right now, like, oh my gosh, I need this guidance. I think that simple quality that you are looking for their intuition, I think that's going to be really, really critical for the right match. Someone who is listening today, listening to you, they know if they're the person who's like, I just need to be heard here. I've been thinking this, but everyone's saying I'm not right. I just need to be heard. And so that to me is going to be one of those distinctives that will help people know if you are a fit for their family.
Yeah.
Do you want to be heard? Yes, Nicole's here to hear you. And she wants her intuition. She's not here to say, no, that's not the way it is. So I think that's,
I mean, even the medical profession, I've had families that call, I know my child has autism, no one's catching it, or whatever it is. You know, it's you've been shut down in a lot of ways and you feel like something's not right. This is not happening the way it needs to be. This relationship is too difficult, or this home life is too chaotic, or whatever it is. Something's off and you know it, and you're not sure how to fix it, but you know that something needs to change.
I love that. That's awesome. I have a lot more questions here for you. So let me ask one question, and even just a short answer on this one will be great. I think very valuable before we move on to, I want to hear a little bit more about some of the work in the schools too. But with the parent and the child relationship, if that child never heals or changes in the way that you hope. Can you talk a little bit about, and this is one of the things that drew me to your work in the first place, from your long-term perspective, how can parents improve their relationship with their neurodivergent child, whether or not the child ever heals or changes in the way that they hope?
Okay. I think that's when we get into that personal work side. So when you take in this journey for yourself, your feathers are not going to be as ruffled when your child makes a choice that you either don't approve of or you see could be bad for them. I think that's hard for I'm thinking something that comes up sometimes, my child doesn't want to do college, right? There is something. Okay. So what does that mean? Maybe you worked really hard in college because you were undiagnosed and had to work 20 times harder to graduate. And it was so hard for you and you want them to have this opportunity and you can afford it. You've built your life so you can afford to pay for college for your child. They don't want it. What does that mean? And so I think that's when we do the shame and the self-judgment piece where we're like judging ourselves on what our children do. I know my child, for example, didn't graduate the way I planned. And I know how hard it was on Facebook when everybody puts their picture up of their kid in their cap and gown. Hey, that's hard because remember, you're not facing your child in those moments, you're facing yourself. So I'm facing myself when I had to say, if I believe that my child is the person that they need to be, I have to be okay with this. So I feel like that you have to come to terms with yourself when you're thinking about your child and the way that when they're showing up as themselves and it's not feeling good to you, that shows that you need to do some more of your own personal work and stop projecting your needs onto them. But, it is a balance. It's definitely a balance so that sometimes, yes, like if your child should be in college and, they have a scholarship or something and they're whittling it away because they're going out every night and they have an alcohol addiction problem. Okay, that's different. But if you are seeing your child do the different things that could help them and it's not breaking down, their being, then that's something you need to look into. You need to look inward there and you have to keep doing it. Every time you have to keep doing it. This set me off about my child. Why did it? And those are the questions that you have to ask. And that's why if you want to lean into the regulation tools, I'm really big on regulation tools now and making it physical, like actually showing the data on how to be regulated, how it feels beyond your body, but what it actually looks like. I have a new tool I've been using. And so I'd love to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me more.
So HeartMath is it's sort of like a neurofeedback device. It measures heart and brain coherence. I just finished my training on it. So I'm actually able to take HeartMath data for over 1,000 students if I want. And I'm piloting this at the private school I'm contracted with right now. But what it does, so let me tell you what this was born from. Let me tell you where this was born from. I have a lot of students when I sit in the school meetings who have quote unquote behavioral needs. That just means something is off. They either aren't heard, something is dysregulating to them, whether it's a sensory need or they're doing something that they have an undiagnosed learning disability that hasn't been identified. So they can't do what's asked for them and they get upset. They get triggered, for lack of a better term. So I think everyone needs to know, we all talk about just get regulated and connection before correction and all of these kind of buzzwords about, just need to take deep breaths and stuff. Okay, we know we need to do that, but how do we show that to a 9-year-old who's, on the edge of the alternative school setting because they've had so many behavioral issues and discipline issues at school? The way that we figure it out, and I found this HeartMath device, and I've always been, for lack of a better term, I'm a woo person. I lean into the spiritual side. I lean into God when I don't know the answer. And I'm not scared to say that as a business owner. And so I knew that we were missing something. I'm like, these kids can't even, some of my autistic kids don't even have the interoceptive. They can't feel it. They can't feel that they're off. They're just angry. And I said, how do we make it visible? Well, HeartMath made a tool that measures, it's an app on your phone and it's a little device that you put on your ear and it measures your pulse and your heart rate. And it gives you a bunch of different mindful activities to show you your coherence. You want to be a 1.0 or above. So when I just did this last week for a school, I had like 40 educators in there. And I said, we always say mindfulness in the classroom or bring mindfulness into your parent-child relationship. You can do maybe box breaths together. Okay, they'll do it. But when you look at the device and you measure it before, or you measure it when you're doing something dysregulated, maybe you hate the dishes. So go ahead and measure your coherence when you're doing the dishes. You know you hate it. And then go do something you really like. Hey, people just need to see the data sometimes. They need to see the numbers.
Wow.
Because they're so logical sometimes, especially my concrete kids.
Yes.
So I'm like, when we go through my executive function like process and workbook, you're checking in with heart math. And then once you've figured out the things that really work for you, you're going to drop those into your day, at certain places. So it may be that you drop into the heart math and actually do a little mini 3-minute meditation, but it may be that, when you color or do this particular artwork, your coherence is off the charts because you tested it. So guess what? Put that in your day, but have the data to support why you're doing it. And guess what? Families can find things that are coherent for them together. Hey, we're all pretty coherent when we do this thing. We're all really dysregulated when we do this thing. Maybe we need to hire this out. Maybe we all hate doing yard work. I don't know what it is. But, you have these actual numbers that get everybody together. And it's so cool to do the testing. So that's what heart math is. Sorry, I'll stop talking about it.
No.
So I like what it does.
I love this. Well, what got me into this was neurofeedback. So when I was working with a brain injured patient, they would have a little measuring neurofeedback. What do you call the little thing that pinches on your hand?
Oh yeah, like the pulse reader.
The pulse ox. It was a pulse ox. And so the pulse ox would clip onto their hands, and then I would lead them through relaxation strategies, and the relaxing of the body would allow the breath to go deeper, which would allow more oxygen into the brain for healing. And so their healing would be accelerated as they use the mindfulness and relaxation strategies. And so that mind-brain connection has been very, very integral to my thinking for now. I mean, I think that was, 16 years ago, if I remember correctly, something like that. And so that immediately resonates with me. And then I know I asked you to coach my daughter. I hired you to coach my daughter. And in that, you would ask her to put things in her day she enjoyed. And so that's what you're talking about. You're like, go test yourself. What do you like? And have your body tell you what you like. Then insert that as a reprieve to help you make it through a day of pouring out. I love it.
Yeah, it resets your capacity. So it's the same strategy, right, that I did with your daughter, but now we're actually having data to slip in. So especially for children who are more concrete, why am I doing this? Oh, look, I have this number, and it just becomes a game, especially for my middle schoolers. They appreciate it. Even my high schoolers have liked it. So I have a 9-year-old who's using it now, and he starts to see what it feels like looking at the device. So then when he goes through his day, he can say, oh yeah, I can tell I was incoherent when I was doing this at school. So it's really teaching you to read your body in a more, concrete way, which I think is really important, especially for those interoceptive kids that don't feel their bodies. Some of my autistic kids. Yeah. So it's been a game changer so far. We're still, it's still working through it. I'm in my pilot program, but I'm loving it. It's very fun.
I have several kids who don't know when they're hungry. And we just all find out because things don't go well. Like, okay, this isn't going well. Do you need to eat something? I remember having a lot of anxiety around being stuck with kids out and about, not having food. And I made that mistake yesterday. We were on our way home to get food. And one of my dear ones was saying, did you not hear me, Mom? I'm hungry. I was like, I'm so sorry. We are so close. 10 more minutes. We're getting there. I'm taking you to food right now. And I didn't have the walnuts in the car. I just, oh my goodness. And every neurodivergent parent understands, I think, that intense anxiety around don't leave home without food because they need it.
They do. And that's something that he could test, right? Yeah. So if you had it in your purse and it's tiny, yeah, he could be upset, but it might distract him a little. Be like, see how your coherence level is measuring right now, and then go home and eat. And then they remember to eat. It makes it a process of them taking on the self-advocacy. Like I have students at school, I need to write a goal that they need to become self-advocates and know when they need a snack. That's not something traditionally schools are like, yeah, just eat whenever you want, right? It's very regimented. So that's a way to say, look, for the child, you need to say you need to eat, go to the nurse's office. And this is not for a diabetic child. this is for any child that's facing that low blood sugar or whatever, however it's causing, however it's showing up. So yeah, it's been really invaluable. And I'm so glad that you shared that experience because yeah, I've definitely been there.
That's awesome. And I love that low blood sugar was something I became aware of for myself at a very young age. And I started trying to manage that and putting extra fats in my food and more protein. So for a good several decades, that's been on my radar that I needed to do that differently than others. But yeah, low blood sugar is definitely a thing. Let's talk about supporting kids in school with IEPs and advocacies. And this is really a strength of yours. And this is leaving anything I know anything about. For the most of my parenting my kids, I've been able to respond to their needs in real time as a homeschooling parent. And just recently, I've brought on teammates with school. I've got one child in full-time school, 3 in part-time school, and 2 fully at home still. And so I think I feel all the different needs. I can say that as a parent, but if I were to step into a public school and need to get advocacy there, that's going to need one set of skills. If I'm going to need to apply techniques as a homeschooling parent, that's going to be another set of skills with a fully different set of resources and all of the options in between that we have today. I think with 2020 hitting, there are so many options now, and it's different than when I started. And let's see, I started homeschooling probably in 2013. So it's a different world, and you have walked with your children that you've coached, with your children that you have in your home, through all the different types of schooling as well. I mean, I think you've homeschooled, traditional school,
part-time school, traditional school.
Part-time. Yep. You've done all those. And so speaking from experience as a parent and speaking from experience as an advocate, as parents navigate these different schooling opportunities, what would you say is the most important thing they need to understand about educational support?
I think, you need to understand yourself first. And I sound like a broken record. But if you don't have the capacity, not everyone has the capacity for homeschooling. And I mean, that's okay. I understand that. And if I feel like it's really the best fit, I might have those conversations with the parents of the pros and cons and how could we make this happen for you? If that is not on the docket for them and that's not going to happen, that's when public school can help. And because there's a legal process under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and under ADA Section 504, if your child, again, has a diagnosed disability, they have rights, and you have rights as a parent to kind of create this individualized education plan or 504 plan to accommodate and then also give specific services for your child. I have students that, non-speaking students, right? They're probably always going to be non-speaking. They may be using an AAC device or a board, but that means that they're going to have the outside occupational therapy and physical therapy and then the in-school. I think parents don't always understand how those can overlap. The two environments, the home environment and the public school environment or traditional school environment, are so different that sometimes the goals don't even match. Your goals will look different for what you're doing at home, which is why when you brought up the difference of homeschool, yes, we show up very differently. And a lot of times some of the school issues disappear when you homeschool because you've changed the environment completely. And I love that. I think that really can be helpful to just make that switch. If you're like, this is not working for my child, and school-based trauma is a real thing. I actually have a counselor that I refer here in Texas who just does school-based trauma. He has a full caseload, school-based trauma. That's what he does. So, and I don't want to say that to scare families, but I get the calls for the kids who get hurt at school, restraints, seclusion, especially in the state of Texas, that's still happening. It's still legal, unfortunately. So some states have made changes there. But I think understanding all the laws is really too much to ask of a parent because there's so many other things that especially if you have a child who has learning differences, whatever they are, you have to show up differently for your child already at home, at school, homeschool, whatever. So trying to take on, and there are some parents who love it and they love the advocacy piece and they study all the laws I have some clients who I'm like, why don't you join the Texas Organization of Parent Attorneys and Advocates? Because you love this and you want to learn more, go for it. I think that there's some people that it really strikes a chord with them. And also you get that purpose that a lot of neurodivergents we love. We love to find the purpose, and there's a lot of purpose in advocacy because you're making systems change. Eventually, you're making systems change. Every time I show up at a school team meeting with maybe 10 or 12 professionals and I offer an accommodation that they've never heard of, guess what? It's in their brain forever, and they could offer that for any other student from now on because they heard it first at our meeting. And that, to me, those little meetings become little professional developments. They're little professional development segments for this one child, right? That's really what my advocacy is. It's how do we teach this team and together with this team provide resources and take their expertise in as well and create this really comprehensive plan. I mean, how many times in our lives do we get to meet together with 12 professionals to talk about our kid? That itself is a gift. I know that public school isn't the match for everyone, but the fact that you've got the OT, the PT, the speech language pathologist, you've got the special education classroom coordinator, principal, all these people are there to talk about your child. That's a gift. They've got all their resources and all their knowledge. Yes, schools are less staffed with some of the school choice and different charter things that are happening. So sometimes the funding is going away, so they're less resourced, especially in Texas, Florida, depends on where you are. I serve clients in all the states. So like Michigan's doing really great with some of these things. Texas harder, but the money is gone, the resources are gone. So we have to get more resourceful. Me coming to the table with resources has been really helpful. I mean, I've never left a meeting where a principal hasn't shaken my hand. Let me tell you, as an advocate, that is weird because we're a disruptor in the advocacy space. We are a disruptor. We are coming in and we want to support the school team too. Now we understand that it's our parents, our families who are supporting at that table. But if, again, like I said, high tide raises all the boats. How do I help the school team too? Bring them into the conversation, lean into their professionalism, get their ideas. And then I've already worked behind the scenes with mom to say, this is what I think we should work on. This is how we're going to get it. And these meetings become these little think tanks for the child. And I love it. I love that part of what I do. I love the brain building that happens in these meetings where we're like, oh, we could try this and that. And I'm really digging into these professionals and saying, what do you see? And then, I know what mom and dad see. And so how do we make it comprehensive? So I like that space. It's very creative for me. I get to go out of the box with the suggestions I come up with. And because I was in the school for so long, I kind of know what's possible and what's not. The truth is anything's possible. If you need to get a private school and paid for by the public school, it's not easy. And I'll give you an attorney for that. But all these things are possible. So how do we make it better for your child and for the school team? We don't want you to hate the school team because your child's going there every day. You don't want that.
That's so good. You just hit so many different levels, like working with the other professionals. And when you have a table like that with 12 professionals, you have, I think, of years of experience. I think of one person with 20 years, one person with 5 years, and then all the locations, geographies they've ever been in, all the connections they have. And I think that one of the most important things that you mentioned is resources. So when you are connected, that is critical. So when a parent would interact with you, they're not only interacting with you and what did we decide? Like 17 years of experience when you're like, this isn't jiving. That's a rough estimate. So based on whatever you said, it's close to that. But whatever that experiences, you have your lived experience as a parent, your experience as an advocate, all the different trainings you've done because you're ADHD, and so you're going to get a new certification every year, right?
Oh, yeah, because I get bored. Because I find a leak. I'm like, I don't know enough about that to really support. So how do I fill in the gap, right? Yeah. And then I was a classroom educator for 12 years too, so all the trainings that came along with that, and yeah,
there's so much that you bring to the table, but beyond that, because you're in the work and you work with the people, then you're connected with others who can resource them as well. And so to me, that, if nothing else, is a huge value. I find more value personally in relational connections than I do in tasks, skills, those types of things, because when you put people together, that synergy, as Stephen Covey talks about, you get gold. And that is what your child deserves. And so anytime you can get this synergistic energy, whether that's at an IEP meeting, or if you're homeschooling, you have Nicole with all the resources and all the people and knowledge of the laws and the skill set of the heart math, like all of that coming together. Like I said at the beginning, when love and skill work together, expect a masterpiece. And so as you know, as I'm talking to the person who's listening right now, as you seek to support your child, you know, really think holistically. I know you're probably zeroing in on one issue right now, and it might be an upcoming IEP meeting, or it might be a conflict in the homeschool co-op, or it might be those shoes that get dropped off in the door every day, and you just can't handle that. There are a lot of different ways that you might be entering in this conversation, but I want to challenge you to think holistically. And then the other piece I'd like to bring in based on what you're saying is the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule, and I'm just going to pull out my homeschooling abacus for this. You guys, this is what I do. I help people find high results activities. So when you are supporting your child, there are about 100 different things you could do to do that. And so some of those, like about 20 of them, are going to give you 80% of your results. So you can do 20 activities, and it's like this one activity, 2, 3, 4, etc. But you do 20 activities and you get 80% of the way there. Okay, these are the kinds of things you want to be doing. On the other hand, and I would put having a coach as like, I don't know, a double, triple, quadruple push
Right.
within when you're looking at high leverage activities, because
Yes.
you're connecting with someone who can connect you in a lot of different ways, not only from what their knowledge is, but their applications. And like you're saying, filling in those gaps, supporting them where there are those lacking pieces. And I just want to I do this in my trainings all the time where I'm like, I literally count to 20 and do, 4 points each one. But when you do ineffective activities to support your child, you can do 1 activity, 2, 3, 4, and you get 1 bead moving over. So for those listening right now, I just moved 1 bead on a 100-piece abacus, and you can do 4 more steps and you get 1 more. Like it is, and you can do 80 activities and you only get 20 points. Like it's really, really different. This is why if you're exhausted trying to support your kids and you're not getting the results you want to be doing those activities that are going to get you those results faster. It's critical that when you take an action step, you link up with high results motions for your kids. That's what they need. Their childhood doesn't have time for you to do ineffective actions. No one's judging here, but like, let's be strategic and wise as you move forward, because that 3rd grade year is critical. And the motion they're going to make in that 3rd grade year, it does impact them. And it does tie to research-based outcomes at the 12th grade. And so there are impacts when they're kindergarten and 1st grade, the reading levels, like you've got to act now and effectively. And so when you need to act now and effectively, that's when you say, I don't have the experience. I'm a mom. I love my kid. I've got that intuition. I'm bringing my piece to the table, and I am creating a table around my kids. And so I just want to set that encouragement out there to really, really lean into wisely supporting your child. And a lot of that is borrowing the wisdom of those who've gone before you. And there are a lot of different ways to do that. But I hear in what you're saying, Nicole, that you have put together quite a program. And I know you, and I know you have.
Yeah. Well, and there's something that you hit on when you say that 80-20. I think one thing that's important about when someone calls Family ADDventures, if you think it's school-based advocacy that you need, but I hear that your child maybe has retained reflexes and they might need an OT, don't pay me to do school advocacy if that's not going to move the bead. You need to take my referral to one of my favorite OTs that I always refer, and she does virtual work too, to make some of those changes. So that's another thing, just by you saying 80-20, and also because you need to have that conversation with someone who understands all the different pieces that come into a child developing appropriately and reaching the goals and outcomes that you have for them. It's not going to be me going to this public school and fighting for the law for you. So don't pay me for that. I'm just saying, like, I'm not going to steer you the wrong way. I just need to hear what's happening, and let's get them to where they need to be. I feel like a child detective all the time.
I love that. That's so great. The child detective. Yeah. Nicole Santiago, the Child Detection Service. I love it. EBS. That's so great. So great. So we're going to land the plane, even though I want this to go for 5 hours, and I have enough for 5 hours. When you zoom out, let's think about the biggest thing, if you could leave for this parent thinking about their child or children and how they can best support them through this educational landscape, when you zoom out beyond grades, services, or compliance, what actually matters for kids as they grow?
I mean, it's unconditional love. Unconditional love. Either they're hopefully getting it from home, from if there's an educator in their school, if it's a coach, if it's a homeschool co-op mom, who's showing them unconditional love. Sometimes it's from your grandparents. Maybe your aunt raised you. Where are you getting that unconditional love? Because your inner voice becomes your adult voice. And we know that the person who spends the most time correcting, they hear that, you hear that growing up and you say, oh, I made a mistake again. I'm wrong again. And I think, especially with neurodivergent children, they hear all the things they do wrong so much. So we just have to show up with unconditional love. There's boundaries around that, but they know that they're loved unconditionally. And that is going to steer the ship always in the right direction.
I love it. There's no better answer than that, in my humble opinion. Love does heal, and it covers up so many things that we do wrong. And so that's a good place to say, like, we're going to make mistakes as parents, and I've made my full share of 100% mistakes. And yeah, we're in there. We're leading this charge today on the podcast with I've made mistakes. And with that, love covers a multitude, like the galaxies of mistakes that we can make. And so I love leaving that one piece with any parent who's struggling. And it doesn't cost a dime. It doesn't cost any money. So if you're like, I have no money, I have no resources, I have no connections, I have nothing, love. I love it. That's it. That is the long view. So Nicole, let's talk about how, if someone's listening and they're like, I would like to hear more from Nicole. I want to understand more of what she's teaching to find out if this is a better fit for me. Where do they go to know if your coaching and your guidance, your advocacy, where do they go to find more if you're a fit?
Yeah. So, I mean, everything's Family ADDventures. So my website is familyaddventures.com. And there's a lot of links to book a free strategy call there. If you go to my Instagram and my profile, there's a link to a free strategy call. You can always get on the phone with me. I'm always on the phone with somebody, and I love it because I learn, what you're looking for, what you need. If I'm not the one to provide what you need, I will follow up with referrals, because to me, that's the most important, is getting children what they need. And sometimes it's also getting parents what they need, which is why the parent coaching piece is so important. So give me a call. You can go to familyaddventures.com, book a call. You can go to the Instagram. You can go to Family ADDventures. It's a Facebook page. But just get me on the phone. Let's talk through what's happening and see what your best next steps are.
That's great. So if they want to gather more information, they're going to go to YouTube or Instagram or your webpage, which is familyaddventures.com. And then if they want to book a free strategy call, I'll include that link in the show notes, and they could just go to the show notes and click it, or they can go to any of those other places and also find out how to do that. But they can just talk to you, essentially, and find out, is this the right fit for me? And ask you the questions, meet with you in person, and then you'll say, go do OT first, then come back.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Okay.
Right. And a lot of the questions, there is a form. A lot of the questions are based around educational therapy and advocacy. But if you aren't sure how to answer the questions, you can just skip them, just make sure it works for you. But give me some information so I know I want to be prepared for our call. So just try to answer the questions the best you can so I can show up with the resources I know you need.
That's awesome. I love that. So you'll have a little questionnaire.
Yep.
They'll answer, give you a little information about themselves. Then when they meet with you, they'll get more clarity. And then clarity calms the chaos. And that's going to help them move forward with peace and in serving their child. So Nicole, if somebody's curious if they are a good fit for you, do you have anything that they could just grab right now to find out if advocacy is the right next step?
Yes. So I do have a little quiz. Do I need an advocate? Kind of ask some of those questions, what's happening at school or at home. If you feel like your child's struggling educationally, do you need an education consultant? You'll figure out the quiz and then you'll know, and you can get in touch with me.
That's awesome. So if someone's on the fence thinking, I might need help, I'm not sure if I need help, do I call her? Do I not call her? Take the quiz. And so we'll have that quiz linked in the show notes. And then we'll also link to a free call as well. If they find out, yes, that is me, We'll have the link for the free call. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm really, really grateful for this entire conversation. I love the depth. I love the breadth and all the side trails that we went on to support kiddos because they matter and they deserve our best support. And I am so grateful for the work that you've done. And I know I started the interview with tears and I end it with tears. Thank you for coming today. And for those who are listening, you are here on purpose for a purpose, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and isn't a substitute for individualized medical, mental health, or professional care. Every brain is different. Results will vary. Thank you for listening to Hyperfocus and High Performance. If today's conversation helped you think differently about how your mind works, I invite you to take the next step. Visit think-time.com/podcast and grab my free training. Why can't I find a planner that works for me? If you've ever felt frustrated, judged, even by yourself, overwhelmed, or simply wondered why everyone seems to be able to follow a system that simply doesn't work for you, you're not alone. In this free training, you'll discover how your brain naturally approaches focus, planning, and productivity, and why many traditional systems were never designed for minds like yours, and whether neuroplanning could help you increase your opportunity to experience more clarity, calm, confidence, creativity, and meaningful progress with peace, not pressure. And if this episode encouraged you, please subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a review so more brilliant, creative ADHD visionaries can discover what's possible. Remember, you don't have to become someone else to do what only you can do, because only you can be who only you can be, and otherwise there will be a hole in history. The path forward is clear. Love your design, then dream, decide, do, review. I'll see you next time.